actually get this going. Come on. Don't go slow today, computer. Okay, there we go. All right. So at this point, what I really wanted to show off was, come on, computer. There we go. I really wanted to unwrap this, and I wanted to unwrap the lamp, right? Kind of get us started on that stuff. So of course, what we could do is we can go to UV editing, right? There we go, that's gone. We can go to the UV editing window, right? Because remember, we have all these little kind of layouts up here at the top, right? Modeling, for our modeling, UV editing, sculpting we've seen, of course, texture paint. So we can always, of course, go back and forth between these different kind of viewports. Oh man, my computer might go slow today, guys. Hopefully not catastrophically slow. Oh, don't do this to me. I made sure to restart it a couple times too to make sure we wouldn't have this problem, but clearly we are. This computer's garbage. Lovely. Come on. Guys, this really isn't Blender. It's honestly the it's multiple things trying to be done on this computer, and the computer is a bit finicky. Oh, this is lovely. All right, great. You're really going to fight me on this today, aren't you? I guess you took Thanksgiving off, didn't you, computer? Okay. Okay, there we go. Caught up. Come on, be fully caught up. Go to UV editing. Don't do this. Come on. All right. So I'm waiting to go back to UV editing because I accidentally clicked on the sculpting workspace. But remember, at the top you have those little kind of workspaces, right? And they're super, super useful, right? So keep that in mind. I'm going to actually move this down a little bit just so my projector students can see this. Okay. All right. That should be pretty good for showing the overall main layout for us. Let me bring this up just a little bit. Okay, there we go. So what we really wanted to do today is, like I said, UV unwrap. And at this rate, since it's going a little slow, that might be all we get to do is finish the UV unwrapping up. But remember, one of the things you could do is, of course, you go to the UV editing workspace, right? And you, of course, see we've got our outliner for our object here. Remember, you can always relabel these things, right? You can always just double-click on the sphere, right? And I just call this wall light, right? There we go. So when you double-click on it, you can rename it. Of course, there's this little green triangle, right? That little green triangle right there. And that little green triangle, when you click on it, it shows you things like your normals, where you can do that auto-smooth stuff. We've seen that a couple times for just making our shading look better on the models, right? But also there's a section called UV maps, right, that you can open up. And this is where you can actually properly rename the UV map if you want to. So I can just double-click on that. It's pretty much usually double-click to rename stuff, right? So we call this wall light as well. There we go. And now we've got those UVs. Now in this case, remember, you're not really seeing the UVs yet because you don't have anything selected here. So 3 for face mode. And then Control A, right? Remember, Control A selects everything, right? It's in the select menu right here, select all, Control A. So remember, the select menu has all your selection tools and the quick keys that they have. And you can see that we've kind of already got kind of the basis for this the way we want to, right? We don't actually really need seams here, right? Because we've already got a border right here, which will work as a seam. And we already have a natural border kind of for the cloth itself. So if we really want to, with everything selected, I go to the UV editor, right? I move my cursor over here. And you could do Control A in this view also, right? So Control A will work in this view as well. So you see a lot of these actually have the same quick keys, right? And in this case, I'm going to go to the UV menu, right? And I'm going to run unfold. Although remember, there is this little kind of V right here, right? It's kind of on its side. It's right next to kind of the little magnifying glass in the UV editor. And if I click on that little V, remember, this opens up your options. And that's where you can get some of your magic UV option tools, just like there's tools here, right? We can open this up, and that's where we can go to Edit, UV Mapping, UVW, and that's where the box and best planers are at, right? But here we can go to Text Tools. Remember that was that plugin, that add-on I had you guys download for free, right? You just go to Text Tools, Blender. It'll bring up kind of a Gumroad, which is a free site where you can download these things. It's a zip file. Remember, that's actually in the video. I show it in one of the videos how to install add-ons, right? You go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons. There's the Install button. You just double-click on it. I'm not going to do that because that will definitely freeze the computer up. It'll Blender up, right? But that's where that text tools comes in. And remember, we have things like some of our UV layout stuff, like Rectify if we need it, the ability to rotate those things. But also, remember, at the very top, you actually have that easy ability to do a checker map, right? So I can just go in here, and I'm just going to do like a 2048. And I can do checker map, and you can see how you can pick the actual resolution here. Not only can you type in the numbers, but there's actually resolution presets. In fact, these are the standard resolution presets that you'll see in most applications, right? 1024, 2048, 4096. They kind of multiply by factors of 2. And these are always square textures, right? So it's 2048 by 2048. And that's the number of pixels, right? And then we can see the checker map on here because I made sure that my shaded mode's on, right? Because there's wireframe, right? These guys right here, kind of in the top right corner of the viewport. Wireframe, then there's just regular shaded, and then of course there is, if you will, kind of textured EV real-time viewport. And so you can actually see the UVs. You can see they're not totally horrible, but not really ideal either. We're getting some distortion here. So what we could do is easily, kind of 3 for face mode, and we could re-unfold these, right? So I can go to UV menu, right? So there's the UV menu here in the UV editor itself. Make sure to select everything, Control A. And I can go to unwrap. And you see how this does a much better job? So you see the difference, right, guys? So I'm going to undo that. That's what it looks like without the unwrap, right? You can kind of see that it's looking fairly checkerboard in areas, but you can also see some distortion. But we go to UV, unwrap, and you see how that looks much more like the shape we're expecting it. That's looking much more like it. And you see how that distortion's much lower. Remember, that's what those checker maps are for, right? Is to check the distortion of your UVs. And you really rarely have to get to 0 distortion. You're just trying to get low distortion. You can see there's actually pretty low distortion here. In this case, I didn't even have to mark seams because naturally this is kind of only half of a squashed sphere, right? And this is just a flat set of quads. So it's kind of already got natural seams at the borders, right, where there's no geometry. So you can see that does a pretty good job of unwrapping for us. Now, if you ever need to repack these or resize these, remember you can go to UV, and you could do average island scale or like the different packing options that are in there, right? So we can do average island scale, and then if you want, you can kind of repack it. Come on, where are you at? Pack. There we go, pack islands. In this case, it's already kind of in good shape, so we're fine there. If you wanted to, remember 4 is object mode, right? But when you're in the UV editor, it's for these islands, right? Yeah, so these you can think of as kind of like UV objects, right? They're not connected directly to each other, even if it's one object. And I could always just hit W for move, and I could move this over here. So remember, move, rotate, scale work the same. A lot of your quick keys work the same. So if I wanted to, I could always kind of move this in a better position. In this case, I feel like the fit was actually pretty good. And if you wanted to make this purely rectangular, remember, UV layout, there's something called rectify, particularly if you have the text tools. And that can take whatever you have and make it square. In this case, you see how it distorts the edges a little bit. So I kind of felt like I was fine with that, the way it was. Maybe just scale it down just a little bit. Maybe scale this one down a little bit. I feel like I'd rather have a little bit more room for the, remember, W for move, R for scale, like normal. And then if you're in object mode, right, 4 for object mode in your UV editor, it selects the islands, right? So you can just kind of R for scale, W for move. And sometimes you might actually want to adjust them a little bit yourself and say, hey, I want the cloth to have a little bit more texture, right? So remember, this is a 2048, so this is only going to get this much of the texture space. So in this case, you're going to see there is going to be a decent amount of texture space dead, right? There's no UVs over these textures. So keep in mind that that's kind of, remember, UV unwrapping is really just the process of taking the 3D model and turning it into a 2-dimensional version of itself that's kind of flattened out and kind of peeled off to be low distortion and go over an actual picture, an image. That's what a texture is. And how much of that space takes up, that's how many pixels it's going to get. And And you see there's just pixels that aren't going to be used. You always want to try to pack this to use as many pixels as possible, but you can see clearly sometimes you just have dead pixel space, right? But generally you want to try to pack this stuff pretty well so there's not a lot of dead pixels, or pixels that won't be used. In this case though, we're not really, there's only so much we can do. All right, so I'm going to save that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the lamp, because that's been UV unwrapped for us already. So we'll go File, Open. And let me find the lamp. There we go. Hit Open. Give it a second here. But this case, you see we just use the Unwrap tool again, right? We've been using a lot more of that box, right? Particularly if in the add-ons you've turned on UV Magic and UV Layout and text tools. Although, remember, text tools you have to download. So I'm going to switch to UV editing really quick. There we go. So remember, text tools is an add-on. You will have to do a Google search for that, right? Google search text tools for Blender. It'll come up. It's pretty easy. It's usually the first thing. You click on that. You just download it. Install it in the add-ons. Remember, I have that in the videos. And that's something I can show again when maybe I'm not capturing, like for a review, when I won't have as many things going on and stressing the computer out. Yeah. And things like UV Layout and UV Magic come with Blender. You just have to make sure to check them on in the add-ons menu, right? So, we can click on that little V here. In this case, Edit has some tools here. UV Mapping, remember that's where that UVW box is at, Best Planer. In this case, we use that on a lot of our things like our room, our desk, our end table. But here we're getting to things that are a little more round and organic. And so Unwrap's going to work pretty well for those. You saw we used Unwrap on our hoses for our mainframe. We used Unwrap on our cushions, right? So things that tend to be softer and more organic, have a lot more curvature, we use Unwrap for, right? We did that for our crab, right? We're going to do it for our more complicated quadruped at the end of the year. We're going to use it a lot on our car as well. But we do get to kind of spend some time doing box mapping, right, on our environment, because we have a lot more boxy shapes, right? So remember, if you've got your UV Magic and UV Layout turned on, and UV Layout's usually, I think, turned on by default. You have to make sure to check on UV Magic. These are some cool add-ons that Blender just comes with that add a few extra cool tools. And in particular, you click on these little V's, right? That kind of point to the side, and that gives you those extra options right here. And one of those UV mapping box. And of course, this has text tools, as well as Magic UV. Some cool features in there that we don't really need for this project, but we might find more useful later on projects. Like you can copy UVs from one object as long as it's the same to the other. So that you say like you have a bunch of like rivets on or spikes on a character's shoulder piece. You UV unwrap one of those, and then you can copy those UVs to the other spikes and rivets. It's kind of neat. But we don't need to see that for this project. So I still got things I'm going to show you guys later on in the year, right? In this case, I'm going to create my distortion map, right? So I'll go to the size here preset for text tools. We'll do 2048 again. Checker map. There we go. And we see that this is really not ideal for our UV unwrapping, right? I'm also going to make sure to kind of go to UV maps here, the green triangle, right? Open the UV map section up here. Double click on that, call it lamp. There we go. And what I need to do now is I need to mark some seams for this one, right? So I'm going to go to 2 for edge mode, right? 2 for edge mode. And I really kind of want the top here to kind of be its own thing. So I'm going to double click, right? Double left click to select an edge loop. I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom here, right? So I'm going to shift double left click to select this edge loop there. Now I'm going to right click, right? Remember, if you right click, that brings up your edge context menus. All your edge tools are here, but you'll notice that of course we have mark seam. So I click on mark seam, and now these are red edge loops. That means that when we go to unwrap, it'll use those as the seams, right? Remember, we did this on our cushions for our chair. We did this on our pipes. We did it on our crab creature, right? You have to think of it like clothing and upholstery, right? You kind of need to find where that seam would be out on clothes and upholstery, and that's where you'd make a seam here. But a seam is really just an edge loop that you mark, right? Now in this case, though, I do need one that kind of goes up the side here, right? Although I might even put one kind of right here as well, just to make it a little easier on the unwrapping. So I'll select an edge there, right click, mark seam. There we go. So got a little extra seam there. And I might even, I think, well, that'll be good. We'll kind of leave it there for now. But I do want a seam going up kind of the side of these, right? So remember, I could select an edge here, and then I could go down and shift left click on a seam down, an edge down here. So see how there's an edge down here touching this other red seam. They have to be touching so that it unwraps it without a little bit hanging on, right? There needs to be a clean cut all the way through. And I've got an edge way up here at the top. Remember, go to the select menu, and you'll see in select linked, there is shortest path. And that will actually select kind of a range between those. I use it all the time, so I actually have a quick key set up to it at home. But I'll just right click to mark seam. There we go. Now there's a seam going through there. I'm going to do the same thing down through here, so I'll just left click on that edge. And in this case, I'm going to shift left click here, select linked shortest path. And then, of course, here it's probably going to be a little bit of manual because it's kind of like right along the side there. But then I can expand this further by shift left click on this edge down here, right? So I kind of manually grab those ones. And then, of course, we go select linked. Not linked, though, shortest path. And that continues to add that to kind of that loop selection. So we can right click, mark seam. And now that's been marked. And then we just do, 3 for face mode. Control A. Now we can go to the UV editor here, Control A. And then we go to UV and we do the unwrap, right? And now you can see how much better the UVs for this look, right? Fairly low distortion. We can see it's handling this a lot better. If you want to, you could easily go to 4 for object mode, select this one. I could go to UV layout here, rectify. You see how it kind of turns those into a nice rectangle. And I can even grab this one here and rectify. Now in this case, you'll notice this rectify has a bit of an issue with some of these parts in here. So sometimes rectify is not really going to give you exactly what you want because of these guys in there. So rectify is awesome, but it's not magic, right? It can pose some problems here. But that'll actually work pretty well for us anyways. And then, of course, Control A to select everything. We can go UV, average island scale, just to make sure they're all set up. Pack islands. And that'll repack them so they're not overlapping each other. And you see how this lamp now has pretty good, pretty low distortion UVs, right? So plenty of times, in fact, a lot of the time, the unwrap is going to be your best friend for UV unwrapping, right? But we did see when we came to doing things like our desk legs, our chair legs, our room, kind of the main frame section, that the box unwrap was the cooler, easier way to do it, right? So basically, when you have really, really boxy geometric architectural stuff, box in the EVW section here is going to be your go-to. But most other things, particularly if it's got a more complicated shape that's kind of particularly more curvy or more organic, you're going to find that unwrap is your better option. And that's where kind of your seams come in there and all that stuff. All right. So at this point, we're getting close to the end here. I think I'll probably stop there for today because we do have plenty of time to do texturing. It'll be better to kind of get a fresh start texturing tomorrow. But just it's great to get you guys one more UV unwrapping video of how you use your unfold, how you mark seams. We got to see box mapping a lot last time. But you see how we've got these in a pretty low distortion state, right? And we're just getting to kind of see some of the neat tools that Text Tools comes with. Might even just kind of maybe scale that down just a little bit there. There we go. All right. I think that'll be a great place to stop that for today. Give you guys some time to work on stuff. We'll come back and do a bit of review stuff again. But yeah, I think that'll be a great place to stop that. So let me stop recording.